One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is the distinction between orality and literacy, or in particular the spoken word and the written word, and how we privilege one or the other. It depends on the context, and there are just so many different contexts where this shakes out. I'm going to see if I can't give a whole host of examples and illustrations to try to clarify this. Some of the thinkers who I'll be drawing upon fairly liberally, I'm not going to identify by name, but some of the thinkers who have addressed some of these are people like Marshall McLuhan, Walter Ong, Neil Postman, Eric Havelock. There's a whole host of other people, but people who are loosely affiliated with the Media Ecology Association. That's roughly, I think, where one would want to go to learn more about this. Okay, so the simplest way to just cut to the chase first pass is to get at the difference between contracts and legal deeds that have to be signed and sort of verbal agreements. There's a sense in which, in some cases, if you don't have it down in writing, it's not a done deal. That is, the writing made the deal. Now, there are some places where, one's word and a handshake, that will do it. But there are other places where, unless you signed on the dotted line and gave a date there, it was not legitimate. Even take something like a return policy at a grocery store. Right? You can go to or at a department store, right? You go to a department store that has a pretty good return policy. They regularly take items and they sell them, and if people are unhappy with them for whatever reason, as long as you have a receipt, you can bring it back. But you have to have the receipt. So you could go into that store and make a big deal about everyone seeing you. You go, hello, I'm buying this product today. You're right here, right now. And they go, oh, good for you. Here, enjoy the product. And they walk right out the door. And then you, for whatever reason, think twice. You think, oh no, I should have had a different color or whatever, and you want to return the product, and you're about to return it, but then the wind picks up and it blows the receipt out of your hand. And even though people saw you just walk out of that store, when you walk back in, they go, well, where's the receipt? And you say, well, I'm sorry, you saw me just buy it. I don't have the receipt. And people will say, well, I'm sorry, if there's no receipt, there's no deal. And it's that sensibility of, well, unless it was down on paper, unless you have the paper receipt of it, I'm sorry, there's no evidence of the sale and it just can't go on. I think you see this with licensing. You say, well, you had a license, but this license isn't expired, and you can see by the expiration date that's printed out on the document. So the document itself seems to be more real than, or it's what makes some situation or some state of affairs real in a way that without the document, it's just not. And yet, if you think about that, think of how you can compare that to so many other kinds of disputes there. I mean, take something like the oral doctoral in for people who are going through a PhD. If some person's in graduate school and they want to earn a PhD, they'll not only have to write a dissertation, but as they're finishing that, they'll then have to schedule and conduct an oral defense. And so the person will have to, quote, orally defend their work in front of their committee, maybe even some peers. And they're going to have to answer questions that weren't perhaps raised, and they'll have to settle disputes over claims made in the text, all this kind of stuff. But there seems to be a belief there that unless you're able to orally defend your views and clarify your views, you really don't know them that well. And so it's interesting in that you write the document, but unless you can orally defend it, it's not fully yet a done deal. So that's an essential part of it. But then when you think about that further, it's interesting because when you do get a degree, now whether that's a PhD or just an undergraduate degree, when you get the degree, what you're getting is a piece of paper, right? You get that piece of paper in the mail and you want the piece of paper. Now, if the people at the end of your career, at the end of your 4 or 5 year stint in college, they said, well, good job, you finished, hearty handshake for you and warm pat on the back and congratulations, you're now a graduate. People would say, well, that's not enough. I want some piece of paper that verifies that I am a college graduate. And so they want the diploma. But it's just a piece of paper. I mean, ideally, that paper just represents those skills, those competencies, including the ability to talk competently about whatever field one has been studying. And even there, the piece of paper that comes, it's a huge it's a symptom or a symbol, right, of all kinds of record keeping and bureaucratic administrative work that went on behind it. So there particular number of credit hours and particular G numbers and social security numbers, all just kinds of documentation that without literacy in writing, it wouldn't make that in any way possible. Right? Think about the TED Talks. I may have talked about this before, but the TED Talks, which you recently see, you see them all online, and the speakers there routinely they speak without any notes. They sort of spontaneously just talk off the cuff, and I think they're trying to demonstrate their knowledgeability, and they're perceived to be more credible if they don't rely upon notes. And there's a sense in which this is now the standard for public speaking, this spontaneously delivered, knowledgeable kind of material that's not a prepared manuscript. But historically, this would have been seen kind of as an insult or as an affront to people. Traditionally, you would expect a person who's giving a public presentation to prepare that manuscript in advance and then to orally deliver it. They sort of present that material very carefully, but it's scripted out with very careful word choice. Today, I think we look at that and we go, what is this? Some sort of BSer? The person doesn't know what they're talking about. They need notes. Why are they so lacking in preparation that they need to rely upon notes there? Whereas, in the past, it would have been, why is some person just speaking off the cuff? Didn't they take the time to carefully prepare a manuscript and thoughtfully select the words that they're going to then compose and give to us? That distinction, I think, is really, it just cuts to one of the major differences in the way that we privilege or we give a legitimacy to the spoken word or to the written word. Think about something like eyewitness testimony, right? So if some person sees a crime, the eyewitness testimony is preferably, I think, done orally rather than in written form. That is, we seem to believe the testimony to have more veracity or more opportunity for interrogation and I guess disclosure of full information when it's reported orally. That is, the person's state of mind, their emotional state, all these kinds of things, they come through in the oral presentation. The written one, we say, well, no, that it was more calculated, more deliberative, and it was perhaps not as believable because it has time to distance from, and you don't have the emotional overflow in there. Now, you set that in contrast to the way that the jurors are, at least in American law. Jurors aren't supposed to take notes. It's partly because of some things are or are not on the record. And they had this court stenographer write down what officially goes down, quotes, on the record, right? What is to be typed down as admissible of what was said that we're going to retain. Other things we say, well, that was said, but that doesn't really count in a court of law. And when we say that, we mean that it's the written document that's more real than the spoken one. Think of, I guess, some of the roles that loose or rough handwriting has versus loose and rough pronunciation. There's a sense in which I think when you're young, neither of them are very preferred, right? If you have disfluencies or stuttering problems or just mispronunciation problems, this can maybe negatively impact someone. They feel really bad about themselves. In the same way that if a person has bad handwriting, they may feel inadequate or they feel like a dummy or whatever it is. As people get older, I think they're able to tolerate sloppy handwriting in a kind of dismissive way, as if it's not a statement on their intellect, in a way that mispronunciation is taken to be. That is, the consistently mispronounced words are seen to be, again, kind of a deficit in a way that the really bad handwriting, we go, well, a person just has bad handwriting, don't really worry about it. So I guess what I'd be interested in hearing from people are, what are some other examples, other illustrations of where and when the spoken word is taken to be more credible, more legitimate, more real, And one of those situations, those contexts, where the written word has that exact same sort of priority. Okay, thanks.